You have to know this. The fact that I'm here matters. The fact that you're there matters. This is no accident. None of us are.
هذه هي قوة مصر.
لقد قررت أن أتنحى تماماً.
Red everywhere, essentially, down by 4-5%. We're down over 16%.
Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate.
Because the Muhammad Ali Joe Frazier is going to meet is going to be better than the Muhammad Ali.
Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation.
نريدها قومة ونهضة إسلامية.
سنعود إلى كويتنا كما عهدناها دار أمن وأمان.
Yes, we can.
حلقة جديدة من برنامج أصحاب السلطة مع ضيف غير هذا المفهوم. فإن كانت السلطة سابقا محصورة خارج أسوار المنزل، فبفضله اخترقت السلطة أسوار هذا البيت وأصبحت تصاحبنا حتى في لحظات ما قبل المنام وعندما نصحو منه. هنا في نيويورك بجانب أشهر متجر لآبل نستضيف من اخترع آبل، ستيف وزنياك، مغير مفهوم السلطة.
هو أحد مؤسسي شركة آبل، وأهم إنجازاته اختراع جهاز آبل 2 الذي نقل شركة آبل إلى مصاف كبرى الشركات. منذ الصغر كان مولعاً بالإلكترونيات، وحقق حلمه بأن يكون مهندس ومبرمج كمبيوتر محترف، ومن ثم استطاع صناعة الدوائر الكهربائية الخاصة بالكمبيوتر، وأن يجمع مكونات الكمبيوتر بنفسه.
Hello.
Hey,
Good morning.
how are you?
I'm fine. How are you, Mr. Steve? I'm really pleased to meet you. Thank you for your time. We were waiting for this from a long time. Many people are waiting for this because you've changed our lives. And for me to say that, we've already met many leaders in the world, many media makers, but still not someone that reflected our lives in the simple, easy way. How does that make you feel, that you know that you changed people's life?
Make me feel very, very chilled inside, because when we started, our ideas were so humble, and it was just, make a computer. Yes, it can help people be more, but the fact that life would change this much, you would have had to guess that memory to hold things like songs would be affordable. You would have to guess that that the internet would come, a way to contact anyone in the world. You would have to know that broadband would appear, and we'd have wired and wireless transmissions everywhere, and you'd have to know that chips would eventually get small enough that you could have a very powerful computer in your hand. So to see that all of that adds up to apps that just do things like, oh my gosh, this is so easy. You know, I watch these superheroes in the movies,
Yes.
and they have incredible power. They don't have nearly as much power as one smartphone.
Mr. Steve, what I meant, I want to really know from the beginning, what is the feeling, the real feeling, when you know that everyone here is in the car, even me, that you've changed how we move since the beginning of the morning. I look to one of your products or one of the things that you created till now and till before I sleep. What does that make you feel?
Yes. Well, it makes me feel very proud, although there were a million people doing very smart things like my own tasks that brought us to the world we have today, where life has changed so much. But I was just sort of a seed at the start of it. Without the seed, it wouldn't have all grown. And I'm benefited as a user to see how wonderful it is. And the fact is, people often said, oh, I don't want to use technology, I want to stick with the old ways. And yet now almost everyone says, wow, this is good. This makes me more of a person, gives me more capabilities than ever before, and that just makes me feel so great. Also, I'm a beneficiary because I get to use it.
Of course.
The results of my own start, I get to use it.
Of course. Mr. Wozniak, before we reach the office, I would like to start talking about your early days. We'll talk about many things, even your book, this amazing book that I enjoyed reading. But before going to there, let's talk about your early days. Having a father that is an inventor too. He's so smart, as you mentioned in the book, and anywhere else. How did that reflect on your life?
You know, I didn't ever realize when I was young how smart he was. He worked for Lockheed, the military, wasn't allowed to discuss what he was working on. I just admired the fact that he put pieces together and made strange patterns on TV screens, and I wanted to be an engineer like him. I wanted to help make life easier and make the world better. And engineers cause change, and change is sometimes perceived as good or bad. But I decided there's something in us that makes some of us want to be a part of that change. And I was really inspired by my father. He also inspired my ethics and morals and how to be a good person, but he didn't say, here's how you have to be. He was not a preacher. He didn't say, here's what you should study, here's what you should be good at, here's how you should act, here's how you should behave, except for one thing, honesty. You should be an honest person and always tell the truth. And that got to me deeply.
But still, for example, I remember when I was young, many people, when they're young, we face problem reading a simple newspaper. Your father bought back home some tech magazines, and you read those magazines. How did that affected the Wozniak, the adult Wozniak?
Yes. Well, first of all, technology improves over time to make devices like mobile internet possible eventually in the future. And as technology increases, we move from vacuum tubes, heated tubes with big filaments that got hot to cook off electrons. We moved from those to tiny transistors. And then transistors became chips. I was in the heart of it through my father. He was working at about the one company in the world that could afford to buy early chips. That was the start of Silicon Valley, those companies. I got to see it, I got to experience it, I got to learn how to hook up parts, hundreds of parts, to make kind of smart devices. My father would sit down at a blackboard and show me how electrons moved in atoms, then how electrons moved on wires, how electrons moved through transistors that made decisions like a neuron. So very, very, very fortunate to get all that great education. Plus, I was luckily smart in math. I was winning math awards in my schools, and that helps a lot because in the starting of electronics, it was analog. Today we talk digital, but in the analog days, it wasn't ones and zeros. It was numbers with formulas and mathematics and deep mathematics, calculus to design circuits and stuff. So I learned all that, and then I enjoyed building things, large projects. My father would suggest something for a science fair, or he bought me a ham radio kit, and I got a ham radio. I studied all the electronics. I got a ham radio license. You had to bolt together every little piece and build your own ham radio in those days. So I became a builder. And then I thought, my gosh, when you have an idea in your head, a project might take months or weeks to complete. It's not done overnight like a school assignment. I got very good at these long assignments. They had no possibility of benefiting my life really, except the pleasure that I got from doing them. There were no classes in schools. There was no one in school that understood it.
Talking about school, exactly. I remember when the lab projects they ask us to do. So I remember always the easiest one, doing a volcano. So this is what we all do. What was your lab or your science lab project? Do you remember one of them?
My science fair projects tended to be electronics, and they grew over years. In about third grade, 8 years old, I built a little a battery, a light bulb, and a wire. And it was a flashlight. Very simple like what you're describing. By the next year, I had tubes that went into water and analyzed whether the water conducted electricity. You put more salt in, it conducts more electricity. You put in alcohol, it conducts better. So electrolytes. But I moved up to understanding atoms. The next year, I built a huge model with hundreds of parts and 92 lights for the natural elements, the electrons in all the 92 natural elements. There were 92 switches, so you could switch on carbon and see the right lights light up for the electron orbits.
What age you're talking about?
I was about 9 years old.
Whoa.
That was a huge project because it had huge metal and wood things and drilling and hooking up tons of lights and a few devices that made decisions, relays and diodes they were called. I didn't realize I was so far ahead of the world. Nobody in school did these things. Nobody but me. So I was winning all the science fairs, and people just sort of started thinking I was kind of genius. They wouldn't talk to me. But then in elementary school still, by age 10, that was when I built my ham radio, and I also built a device with hundreds of transistors that would play a game called tic-tac-toe and never lose, because every transistor could make a little decision, a rule about how you should play tic-tac-toe, and I had about 50 rules that all added up to never losing.
Wow.
That was an incredible project too, because that was right on the right stretch to go up to computers, to designing computers someday. I was on a nice staircase just doing the right things in the right years of my life.
I imagine this interview since long time ago. You know, we tried to prepare this interview for a long time, and I imagined what type of a man would I meet. But it seems from the beginning that you are a technical guy that loves what he do, loves those simple details. But I want to go to the personal feelings more than those scientific facts. What do you feel now when you know that usually when we were young, when we were in the car, we look into the windows. Nowadays, people are on their phones looking down because of technology. You changed how we move, how we do, what to read, what does that makes you feel now, remembering that? Because we were in a car, so I remember that situation.
It makes me feel like a very fortunate person to be a symbol for all the good things that have happened. And I know that a lot more people than myself were involved in that happening. And a lot of accidents of life, how atoms are built, the physics that would make these devices and the life we have now possible. I like to tell a joke that Steve Jobs and I, when we started Apple, we wanted to make blind people equivalent to seeing people. Oh. And now everywhere you walk, you see people look at their phones and they're blind. It's a joke.
So you did the opposite. You made everyone blind.
But it tells you how important the devices are to people.
Yes, of course.
And you know what? The feelings you have from something are really what guide you for the rest of your life. What you think is good and what's bad. It's really, oh my gosh, do I want to do something? Do I enjoy doing something? Those are the better guides to where you're going to wind up in life.
We met leaders of the world, but I wanted to ask you something. The leaders, they know since the beginning, when they're in the beginning of their path, that their goal is to change their country or the world. When you were in the garage or when you were in your early days, was that a goal to change the world?
It was not for me, and it was for Steve Jobs and others. You need different disciplines to create a business and make something successful. Steve very much wanted to be an important person in the world, and to be an important person in the world, he would have to make those steps that take the world forward. I just wanted to be one of the greatest engineers ever, that engineers would say, how did you build this thing that was unbuildable before? I wanted to think out of the box and solve problems to make devices possible so people could have a better life. But thinking about, oh my gosh, we're going to really, the world's going to be changed. Well, I was in a computer club. When we started Apple, actually, I was more the inspiration of this is how it's going to change life for people. They'll be able to communicate and educate, and the geek will be important. I was talking that way because I was influenced by professors at local colleges speaking to our homebrew computer club. And Jim Warren would talk about how the world was never going to be the same. That gave me the heart, the feeling, the spirit. But what I was good at was building things. So I built the device that would help start the revolution. I wanted to be part of a revolution of how people live their lives, very much. Now, after we got Apple started and we had money invested, Steve Jobs had been turning my work into money for 5 years. Steve Jobs saw himself, that's when his personality changed. And he became, I am going to be the most important businessman. I'm going to make sure I am the face of Apple Computer and I run things and get all these things done, which was good for the world in the end, but it went through some rough times because he was rushing too fast to be important. If you say, I'm going to change the world in all these great ways, I'm going to be one of those people, and you move too fast, technology, the prices of things isn't ready for you, and you'll have failure getting things done, which is called executing. So vision isn't that the important thing on its own. You know, motivation is wanting to do something. Vision is sort of having an idea of where it might lead you, but you've also got to work with the costs and the technologies of the day to bring it in a way that basically market it, bring it to a market.
But I wanted to ask you, if someone looks nice, he would like to hear from people telling him, oh, he looks nice. Being smart, did you want people to know that you're a smart person? Does that made you feel happy when you were young? People calling you, this is the smart person?
I was shy, so I did not socialize well among people. And the credit I got in life was when people looked at my grades, my accomplishments, my designs, things that I built, and were amazed by it. I could start talking to them about it. This was very important to me. So I wanted other engineers, people who hook chips together to make devices, people who write software to do things. I wanted them to look at my work and say, whoa, this is unbelievable. Where did you get those ideas? I understand now how they felt. I look back on my youth and I look at the designs I did and I say, how did I think that way? How did I come up with these things that were so different than in any book, but they made the whole industry possible? So I'm kind of amazed, but I wanted other people to think I'm the world's greatest engineer, or one of them. And I got that more back in early days. Nowadays people say, look at these great things that it resulted in that I have in my hand. But I was really just right down to another engineer saying, wow, this guy really thinks differently.
Your father enjoyed playing football.
He was very good.
He was very good, yes. And he was one of the heroes of the city because he was a good player. Didn't you have something that attracted you to football, to practice football?
My father absolutely got me involved in a lot of sports, and I was very good. I'd play Little League Baseball, and I'd make the All-Star team, best runner, best pitcher. I played football with my friends, very good. I didn't play it in school because by the time you got to high school, it was kind of bigger people, but boy, I could just spot a ball and run and judge it and jump up and catch it in the air over my shoulder. I mean, I was very good at all sports. I did track and field. I did pole vaulting in school. So athletics, and I always attributed that to my father. I remember doing all these things with him. You know, he was very encouraging to athletics.
Do you remember a certain name? Who told you that you're a genius? It's obvious, but who told you that you'll do something that will amaze the world? Did anyone told you that?
My science teacher in middle school pretty much told me that. My electronics teacher
what did he
in
tell
high
you
school
exactly?
felt.
What did he tell you?
He told me that you've done one of the greatest things. You're on the greatest path. Nobody can do what you're doing. But the trouble is, it was electronics. It wasn't classroom work. Now, in classrooms, I won awards that schools give for the best math student. So I won those a couple of times, and that was a way of telling you you're very good at something that's important. And my teachers just, if they gave me A's or A pluses, the heck, that's commendation too. That's saying, hey, you're going somewhere.
But I wanted to know if even not from the sector, someone that looked and said that you'll have an amazing future. Did you hear that from someone that you remember that word?
Well, I don't know. My sister said Steve's going to either wind up in jail or rich.
Why jail? What you're doing is
I played a lot of tricks.
Such as,
I don't know, getting firecrackers and setting them off and that sort of thing.
And from reading the book, you said in the book when you've met Steve Jobs, you felt that this is a person that understands what I'm doing.
Yes and no. He wasn't at that level of electronics, but he understood electronics enough to know, that I was, a real superior.
Do you remember that first meeting?
I remember it pretty well, yes. We talked about pranks we had done. He described going in some tunnels under our high school and finding some phone lines that went to the principal's office. So in a later point in time, I had to go in at night and sneak down into those tunnels and found out what he was saying was right. And I told him about a lot of pranks I had done at the school, making strange tones with electronics in the television sets.
So who bring you both to each other?
A good friend down the block, Bill Fernandez. I had designed a computer 5 years before the rest of the world was going to try to say, this is the style of computer that can be affordable. 5 years before, I built my own computer. I got the parts for it, And Bill said, you should meet this other guy in our high school, Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was 4 years behind me.
Yeah.
We never were at the school at the same time. We never had the same teachers. I had pretty much the high-level classes.
But I think he's your, it's 1 mile between both your houses. Is it?
He lived about a mile away, but that doesn't mean I would know him necessarily. But after I met him, we were just close friends. I brought him to my house the first day we met, and I showed him the liner notes to all the Bob Dylan songs, because I had all the Bob Dylan albums, and he was in high school, so he didn't have albums. And I showed him words to strange songs like Desolation Row, and we started realizing there is something in Bob Dylan's thinking that's one of those forward things in the world, and that's what Steve Jobs wanted to be. So we went to a lot of Dylan concerts and other concerts. We appreciated music together. We played pranks together. We got inspired by devices that by putting tones into an American phone, you could make calls anywhere in the world. Who would believe that insecurity was there? And so we did a lot of things. This was Steve Jobs 0, starting 5 years before Apple. And we were very, very good friends. I remember driving him up to college and all those sort of things. We just did young people friend things together.
ستيف وزنياك هو أحد مؤسسين شركة أبل وصاحب اختراع جهاز أبل 2 الذي نقل شركة أبل إلى مصاف الشركات العالمية الكبرى. كان مولع منذ الصغر بالإلكترونيات، وكان حلم حياته بأن يصبح مهندس كمبيوتر محترف. وقد سنحت لستيف وزنياك الفرصة للعمل مع مؤسس أبل ستيف جوبز عندما عرض عليه ستيف جوبز إنشاء شركة لصناعة الكمبيوترات. وقد وجد ستيف جوبز في وزنياك ضالته، حيث كان دور ستيف وزنياك التصنيع ودور ستيف جوبز في التسويق، فحقق بذلك ثنائي متناسق ومنسجم يكمل كل منهما الآخر.
You gave me this creative business card. Why did you do it with metal?
Well, first, I like things to be different, but second, after 9/11, you'd go on airplanes and you'd order a steak and they'd give you a plastic knife, and the plastic knife wouldn't cut the steak very well. So I would take my metal business card and slice the steak really well. I like to play at the limits of what is expected. And the flight attendants would say, "Oh, a metal business card," and they never came and said, "Hey, that's a knife."
I wanted to ask you, while we're standing here behind Apple, who is the only person that takes a salary from Apple from the beginning till today?
I am so proud. My loyalty to Apple is so strong that I have never left the payroll or my employment contracts. From the first day we started the company till now, I've been paid every single week on the payroll system. I'm the only person. I get a small token salary, but I'm so proud of that.
And do you visit Apple? Do you visit Apple store when you're in your free time?
In a lot of the cities, I travel a lot, and when I get to other cities, I go to Apple stores. When I'm here in New York, I usually prefer to go to the Soho store because it's got more artistic, creative type people in that area. But I've been to this store. It saved my life. This was the first 24/7 Apple store in the world, and one time I was here in New York, and due to a cat knocking over a glass of wine, my computer went dead, and I came down to this store at 2 in the morning, bought a new computer, switched my hard disk into it, and I was back in business.
شركة أبل التي يبلغ مجموع أصولها اليوم أكثر من 300 مليار دولار تأسست عام 1976، وقد يجهل البعض بأن فكرة ستيف جوبز قد تم رفضها 5 مرات، ولكن بعد محاولات عديدة تكللت آخرها بالنجاح، حيث اتفق كل من ستيف جوبز وستيف وزنياك على بيع بعض من ممتلكاتهم الخاصة لتجميع مبلغ 1300 دولار أمريكي كفيلة بصناعة أول جهاز كمبيوتر لأبل، وكان ذلك في منزل ستيف جوبز في ولاية كاليفورنيا.
How does that feel? How does that feel to meet parents for a son that looks up to you?
That's right.
It means so much to me, more than starting Apple, more than being great in technology or even starting personal computers. It's that somebody I inspired, I helped somebody come to find something they wanted to do in their life. That's what means something to me. It's people. People is much more important than technology.
What does that remind you of?
Cream soda, one of my favorite drinks all my life. And it reminds me of, it doesn't matter what brand, all cream sodas, I love them. To this day, I drink them, and it reminds me of a computer I built.
The first one?
1970, all on my own design. I had taught myself how to design computers in high school, but I could never afford a part, and I lucked into getting the parts, and I built it, I soldered the wires, and it worked switches for ones and zeros and lights, and we called it the cream soda computer. I built it with a friend, Bill Fernandez, because we would get on our bicycles, ride our bicycles down to the grocery store, buy some cream soda, bring it back to the garage that we were working in with that computer, and we called it the cream soda computer. No, very important step. You know what, without that step, it's hard to say that we would have even wound up with other stuff I did later in life or Apple Computer itself.
Before getting to Apple, the final product, it is always there, challenges in the beginning. Do you remember a story, a specific story for you and Steve Jobs in the beginning that shows how challenging it is in the beginning?
I hate to say it, but I almost remember no challenges at all, because I was in about a 10-year period of my life where, like, songs can come out of a certain writer or paintings out of a certain painter. Just these computer designs and ideas, they were so valuable at the time. They were worth money, and they just poured out of me, and I never had to stop and say, oh, I've got something very tough. Yes, once in a while I struggled with something that was harder than normal and took longer, like I was basically a hardware guy. But if I didn't have a programming language, who could type in game programs into my computer? And games was very important. So I had to write a language, and that was a long, hard project, but my brain always figured out ways to do it, even if I had no education in the field. So for me, it was nothing. For the first few years of Apple, I sat there thinking, this is what I would be doing on my own time, just for fun, and I'm getting paid for it, a salary. We did have to raise money. The Apple II was going to be the big product that would change the world. We demonstrated it before we ever shipped the little Apple I, which was modified from something designed for slower performance. This was a real great computer. The first time ever arcade games would be color. The first time ever arcade games would be software, where a 9-year-old kid could program a game in 2 days rather than an engineer design it in a year. This was a big deal, but you needed money to make 1,000 computers. Steve Jobs was the businessman. He went out seeking money for all these different angles, and we talked to companies that might invest in us, and venture capital, and he found an angel. We were referred to an angel, Mike Markle, who invested in us. So that was sort of the biggest challenge. And once we hit that, we had a large ownership of what we had created, plus we had the money to build stuff, and we had an adult advisor who would advise us.
So this is why you always say it's not only Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. There is always a third party.
The third party who invested in us owned the same amount of stock, me, Steve Jobs, Mike Markle. We all owned the same amount of stock. Mike Markle told us who you hire to set up a business, how a business has to run. It should be marketing driven, and he ran marketing. I mean, he was retired with a lot of money from a stock option at Intel, but he was looking for something to do in electronics. So he joined us, and he felt that this was going to be home computers, was going to be the next big revolution, where in 5 years we'd be $1 billion company. And I thought, you can't talk numbers that big. $1 million is the hugest number in the world. And I said, well, but the more success you've had in life, the bigger a number you're allowed to talk. So he joined us, but he really did more than that. He really established the company, set up how it would run. He started training Steve Jobs on marketing principles. And Steve became, the great marketer, salesman of the world.
And so that's what I wanted to know. What is your role and what's Steve Jobs' role?
Yes.
What's the difference between you both?
Okay. I had created the computer and totally owned it. Before we started the company, we were seeking money based on my total invention. I did not want to run a company. I was non-political. I don't believe in a lot of the outcomes of politics. It goes back to Vietnam War times and people fighting. I'm for cooperation and thinking using the brain. So I said I would not run the company. I will be an engineer. I will go in the laboratory. I'll be an inventor. I'll come up with the products and products and products to take our computer further along the path. But I do not want to run the company. Steve Jobs, however, wanted to be a very important person in the world. So he just he didn't have any qualifications for an executive position or anything, but he would deal with and just talk with and argue and discuss points with all the top people in a company and learn how every single division works. He would be groomed to someday be a CEO. And it worked. He learned very well, and he took almost anybody's thinking and modified it a tiny bit, put a tiny twist on it, and almost always Steve Jobs was the smartest person in the room, and his twists were good. He changed the colors of our first logo, 6 colors we had in an Apple. He changed the order of them, but the way he did it was actually better.
Going back to your book, you said luck for 34 times. Why luck? Are you a lucky man?
I'm a very lucky man, but you know what? I'm one who didn't really need luck for life. I base my judgment of how good is my life on how happy I am. And I had my formulas for happiness long before Apple. I figured them out on my own. They're in my head. Just for what kind of person you are going to be, how you're going to live in life. I didn't need Apple to be happy. Now, the fact is, I was going to build a certain computer at a certain point in time because I wanted a computer from my high school days. I wanted my own computer, and they cost as much as a house. I could never afford one. But I became a very skillful designer, and I watched the price of parts, and the day that I saw a useful computer being affordable to build on my own, I was going to build it. So that computer in 1975 and 1976, the Apple I and the Apple II, I was going to build them for myself for no reason, no company, nothing like that. And it turns out that they started becoming very valuable. They got good press. Other people said, if I have a computer, I'll be able to run my business better than ever before. And they started buying these things. So we made a lot of money off of it. But it was almost like that. For me, that computer was going to be there in that year. It was just the right year that it was worth a lot to society.
Now the fruit Apple is redefined because of you, because of Steve Jobs. Apple, there's always a question, what do you mean by Apple? Is it the fruit or the product? Who called it Apple?
Well, Steve
Why
Jobs,
Apple?
I first heard the suggestion of calling ourselves Apple Computer from Steve Jobs as I was driving in a car. My first response was, the Beatles record company is Apple Records. How can we be Apple Computer? Wouldn't it be a conflict? And Steve just said, well, they make music, we make computers. I said, that's all it takes? He said, yes. And he'd gotten given the name Apple Computer by someone else, actually. But he was always able to recognize which ideas were the best. And in those days, there was no big money in computers. The big companies didn't believe it would go anywhere. When there's no money, you're kids. You're humble. You're just starting with no money at all. You name anything you want. You pick a name of your company, anything you want. Now, we got an ad agency. We had the Apple II computer, and it was obvious that this computer was going to build a company. But we got an ad agency, we hired them, and they first tried to talk us out of the name Apple. They said that Apple is simple and you should have a powerful name that says how much computers can do for people. And we said, no, no, no. When computers go in the home, Apple's already a good word in the home. It's a healthy fruit. And in school, we have a phrase, an apple for the teacher. And we also have a phrase, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. So Apple has a good connotation. We say, in America, we say, as American as apple pie. So for the people who are going to be buying these computers, it's not power, it's kind of niceness.
We talked about your relationship with Steve Jobs, but we didn't talk about the first project that you both work on. What was the first project that you both worked on?
By the way, we worked on about 5 projects over 5 years that I designed and invented. Steve would come into town and turn them into money. But the first one was called the Blue Box, and I was about to go to my 3rd year of college the next day. And I read an article in a magazine that you could put tones, beep, 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 into an American phone and dial free calls anywhere in the world. Who would believe this? Supposedly some technicians had figured it out and the phone company had this insecure flaw in it. And we didn't think it was real. We thought it was unreal. And Steve and I researched it at a local library and we found out this thing really exists. So I designed and built one, and beep, 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 could make free calls. And Steve said in the dorms at Berkeley, Steve said, we could sell these. He was always into selling things. He was a salesman, and he had less money. So we actually sold them, and I feel guilty about that because I played with the device because it was intriguing technology, but I paid for my own calls. I paid money for my phone calls to my relatives. I didn't use the blue box to save money. But these other people that I sold blue boxes to with Steve Jobs, they were using them just to save money. You know, but to me it was just an incredible tool that nobody would believe exists. And we had fun doing that for about a year, just one college year. You know, just exploring what we could talk operators in, how the networks of the world worked. Yeah, fun. It was a fun time for us. And I'm so proud of my design because I went and I did real Wozniak genius stuff in there. I used, normally you put inputs into a chip and the inputs tell it what to do and the outputs do the job. I knew that the inputs send electrons back out, and those are like outputs. So I used the inputs as inputs and outputs at the same time and took the electrons to turn the chips on. Don't ask me to explain how a chip sends the electrons, it'll turn itself on, but I knew the circuitry so well inside, it worked. I mean, those are genius things that, you know, were sort of the level that I did for the next 10 years, including Apple products.
The day when Steve Jobs is fired from Apple, what was your point of view of that?
First of all, I wasn't around. I think I heard of it secondhand. I forget where I was at the time. I might have been in college. I might have been, but he wasn't really fired. I know the people very well that were involved, like the CEO, John Scully, and the other board members. He was not fired. The Macintosh had failed. Steve's project, the Macintosh, third time at Apple, he headed a computer project that failed financially, and our stock dropped, you know, by a third in a week. It dropped hugely. Well, that's the time the board of directors has to say, how do we get out of this mess? Steve had convinced us. We bought into his vision. We believed in it, that the Macintosh-style computer with a mouse was the future of Apple. But it would take years to build a market carefully. We'd have to take a lot of steps sending sales reps out. We'd have to get software written for businesses. There were a lot of steps that Steve wasn't the person to achieve. His ideas were just let the Macintosh sell and the sales will increase, and get rid of the Apple II sales, cut their budgets so we can lose money on the Macintosh. He had bad ideas, so the board of directors relieved him of Macintosh responsibility. As far as making a computer, he could have been funded any number of millions of dollars he wanted anywhere in the world to build a new computer. But here's the problem. So he was not fired from Apple. The trouble is, if he has bad relationships with the members of the board that dismissed him from the Macintosh, they fired him from the Macintosh, he has bad relations. He can't stay in the company designing computers. You can't develop a product with people, working with people that you kind of lost a battle to. So he really had to leave and be on his own to be independent and himself and get his own ideas into play.
بعد سنوات طويلة وممتدة ساءت العلاقة بين ستيف جوبز وستيف وزنياك، حيث منع الأخير من دخول مقار الشركة، رغم أنه كان لا يزال موظفا في شركة أبل براتب سنوي مقداره $120,000 سنويا. ومثال على سوء العلاقة بين ستيف وزنياك وستيف جوبز، فقد فصل أحد موظفين أبل فقط لأنه عرض جهاز آيباد على ستيف وزنياك.
You left Apple. Why? Why did you leave Apple?
I left Apple 2 times. Once I had a plane crash, and I came out of amnesia 5 weeks later. I was on the Macintosh team, and I called up Steve Jobs, and I said, the Macintosh group is the most creative people in Apple, my best friends. They're capable. Burl Smith, who never went to college a day in his life, can do that clever design like me. And it's in good shape, so I'm going to go back to college because this is the last chance in my life to go back to college for my last year and earn a real degree. And because my name was famous, I went back to Berkeley under a fake name, and my Berkeley diploma actually says Rocky Raccoon Clark.
You talk about universities. I felt when I read the book that you love universities, but they don't love you back. You're out of every at least the first 3 universities you tried to continue. What was the reason behind you leaving a university?
When I first went to the university, it was the year of my life that probably changed my life more than anything else. I loved being independent, being able to go to bookstores and buy books about computers that I didn't even have classes for. Introduction to Computers was a graduate level class. I took it as a freshman and I got an A+. I knew computers so well, but I thought, okay, now we have a computer, and they told us submit these numbers and you can run programs. And I started writing programs to calculate important tables of numbers that scientists use. Nothing, no bad stuff, you know. I was doing a lot of good stuff. I didn't realize they had a budget for a supercomputer pricing, and I ran our class 5 times over budget with my programs that calculated Fibonacci numbers, 60 pages at a time, building up reams and reams of them to where the numbers were as large as a page. Clever programs, and I'd only run 60 pages at a time, so I wouldn't run the computer over its limit of 64 seconds or something that you could run. And I ran so many of those. I ran our class 5 times over budget, which was much more than out-of-state tuition at one of the most expensive state universities in the country, the second most expensive in terms of out-of-state tuition. This was a huge amount of money. I'm going to say it was probably equivalent of $20,000 today to $50,000, that if I tried to go back, they might try to charge me. They might try to come after the money from me, and I was scared my parents would find out. But I had done good things. I had used my computer class to write programs that the scientists would use to learn how to make those numbers that you can't do by hand. A person can't do without a computer. They should have said, Steve, you did a really, really good job. You just got to stop it because there's a budget you didn't know about. They should not have said, oh, this is a bad thing. We might charge you the money. Yeah, so I was not expelled. I was put on probation for computer abuse, and that was actually for something else. I wrote a program that said, good scrap paper page 1, good scrap paper page 2, and it spit out of the printer so fast the paper would fly in the air. I thought it was a funny joke, but they didn't treat as a joke.
Talking about the future of technology, how do you see the world in the next 25 years? What would be the technology by that time?
It's scary because a lot of the computer technology is taking over not only the work that humans do, but the thinking. They're starting to learn. Computers are starting to learn the way humans learn, to get better and better at something, and within an hour, a computer can learn a video game better than any human. And computers in cars, are learning ways to drive by learning methods much better than us telling them, here is how you drive from our knowledge. So will they supersede our knowledge and give us abilities we never had based on our own brain? Of course they will. Will it become disastrous for somebody to seek a job and money for their brain when a computer kind of could do it better? If a computer could come around and talk. If I were a bunch of metal right now talking to you, that would be very dangerous to real humans. You know, they'd be put out of business by my thinking, for example. We worry about that. I think it's tens to hundreds of years off before that sort of thing is going to be a reality. For now, everything that we are able to adapt computer technology to helps us have an easier life and do what we say, here's what I want to do. We've never talked about an artificially intelligent machine that says, what should I do today? Here's what I want to do. They aren't at that level of independence. We just think if they can think well, they're artificially intelligent. No, they've got to have something that humans have. Here's what I want to do. I wonder what a method to solve it might be. No, they only obey instructions, but they're going to be helpful to us. Even when they get to the point they can think for themselves, they're going to be helping humans. We're always going to be partners because we're the ones creating them. We're the ones that they are about and we're about. That partnership will not go away. It's going to be, as close as a person who loves their dog.
What do you think more? Isn't our life not private anymore because of technology?
It's one of the things I regret about being one of the inventors of early technology is that everything you do, every purchase you make, every place you drive, there's cameras, you're being watched, and that fights creativity, that fights the instinct to, oh my gosh, I'm going to try to do something people haven't done yet. I'm going to go a little. I find that the most creative people that started companies like Google and Apple, you ask them about their background, they love to talk about their youth, and it was always a little bit of misbehavior, playing pranks, tricking people on computers or with electronics. And I think a little bit of misbehavior that's not, trying to steal from people or harm people. I think that that's good for developing a creative way of thinking. Can I do something other people don't do? Is that going to go away if we're all so tightly regulated in our behavior? So I kind of fear that. And we've gotten to the point that I can't even send my wife an email saying, I love you, without taking special steps to secure it, or everybody in the world gets to hear it. I can't tell my wife, my favorite color is green, because and have it secret between you and me. I have to be in a room with her and whisper it because there might be a microphone. No, it's hey, this was going to happen. We can't stop it. So hey, it's the future.
Let me talk about the present. Many ask us to tell you through social media, if you're now 18 years old, do you have the same fair chance to create something that makes people feel amazed about what you've done nowadays? Is it the same chance?
You could have. People were asking that question decades ago, and here's Mark Zuckerberg in a dorm room in a college with an idea that seems interesting and creating something that seems interesting. People were starting, ride-sharing things, Uber. And I thought it would fail at first. I thought, who needs that? We already have cars and we have taxis. And look how huge it's taken over the world. So where these ideas come from and which ones will hit and miss and become how popular, new social sites pop up all the time, which ones will become the big unicorns, the huge billion-dollar companies, this is still happening, and it's coming from a lot of young people. When we started Apple, before that, Silicon Valley had a reputation for venture capital funding. Lots of companies spun out of existing companies. Companies spun out people who knew how to do the products. Ever since personal computers with Microsoft and Apple, later on companies like Google, it was young people who weren't established businessmen, who didn't have the millions of dollars of a business already, just going out with their brains, coming up with ideas and turning them into ways that would change our life. That's still going on to this day. Whenever I go to a technical university, people always think, if I ever get a chance to be in one of these big startups, I want to take it. I'm going to have to go get a job to
Yes.
pay for my apartment rental, but if I ever see the chance, I want to be a part of one. Not everyone, but a large number of people really want to be involved in that kind of oh my gosh, an idea from nothing and we turned it into something important. That's a great feeling.
That leads me to my next question. You made Apple. What motivates Steve Wozniak today when he wakes up in the morning? What motivates you?
Well, I have my formulas for happiness that have nothing to do with technology necessarily, but when I wake up, things that I've created, a lot of internet, email, fast news, I'm on my computer a lot, and I'm thinking, it's kind of like, I have to get this done. I have to keep up. I worry if I get sick and I miss, and I'm not around to people. I'm not available on some social level for some time. And how would I ever catch back up? It always works out. I was away from a computer and a phone for 3 weeks once. I think more than anything else about young entrepreneurs, young people having a chance anywhere in the world to think of good ideas and turn them into products and give themselves a life based on it and improve the life of others. That's the most important thing to me, because I go back in my own life. And those days in high school and the university were so important to my development to be a good creator in that way. I want to help other people. I want to inspire young people. I go around, I do a lot of talking. I am with one technology company that's improving the speed of data centers. I'm also interested in things that we do together, popular culture. I put on rock concerts once. Currently, I put on last year Silicon Valley Comic Con, a mixture of pop culture, movies and TV shows, along with a scientific background. I built it into the show, seminars on how to get to Mars and things like that. I believe in that, and it was so outstanding a success, and we're doing it again in March, and we're planning one for Tokyo this December.
Talking about the future of Apple, what do you think? What would be the future of Apple?
Apple Computer is so huge now. Huge things don't disappear. They have prominence for an awfully long time. They can have failure after failure after failure, but they can keep buying other companies or successes. They can buy their way to restarts and have more chances and more chances. So Apple's going to go on for a very long time. What is it going to be? It started out with computers. We took the name computer out of our company name. It's because we have these little fun personal projects. iPods for music. And people don't think of that as a computer. You're not sitting down creating programs that do things. You're just listening and using the device. We're moving in towards jewelry with the Apple Watch. And so it's hard to say where Apple's going to actually go and wind up.
I asked you the question before the interview, and you amazed me with the answer. I asked you about what's the best device in Apple. Is it the iPhone? Is it the iPad? Is it the...
I used to say sometimes it was the Apple II made the biggest change in my life, how I lived my life. And then sometimes I would say the iPhone was the greatest product introduction of all time. But the Macintosh had such meaning to the world. And I would have trouble deciding between those steps. And now it became clear to me, when I'm using my mobile machines, it's third-party apps, like getting an Uber ride, checking an airplane reservation, finding out what movies are on, getting a reservation at a restaurant tonight. All these little third-party apps that do things that you almost wouldn't have expected. When Apple came out with the iPhone, it didn't have all those apps. Apple left it to the rest of the world, the brilliant people in the world, to create them. And the third-party app store has changed my life the most.
يقدم ستيف وزنياك اليوم الكثير من الدورات التدريبية والمحاضرات حول العالم ومنها دول الخليج العربي، كما يحرص وزنياك على حضور المؤتمرات التي تقيمها أبل خصوصا بعد رحيل ستيف جوبز. ولم تخلو حياة ستيف وزنياك من التكريم والتقدير، حيث حصل على الميدالية الوطنية للتكنولوجيا من الرئيس الأمريكي السابق رونالد ريغان.
You've been in the Middle East, you've been in Kuwait. How did you find the entrepreneurship in Kuwait?
Well, the people were so friendly there, and also the malls. It was just like as easy to live as being in America. It was very comfortable, which I like a lot. And I remember my suitcase didn't come. So I had to go shop for clothes, and I got to wear I wore some hair dress. I will never ever forget that time in Kuwait. No, the people were wonderful. They were also very well educated. They had great scientific knowledge, and yeah, I love Kuwait. I'd go back there anytime.
Thank you. You gave them many tips. What do you tell them now after the time you spent there? What do you tell them now?
I tell them now, when you have brains and you think, I wonder if I could be important in the world, but you've got to start companies, you've got to have products or services, something you sell. I tell them, look, a lot of people are trained in business. They don't have the technical background, the engineering background that I had. And they're trained in business how to come up with an idea, write it down in a business plan, go out and seek funding, get it funded, and then we'll hire the engineers. I tell them, no. You want to start something as young and be successful, make sure you have somebody that really wants a business that makes money, because if it doesn't make money, it just goes down. Somebody who really understands marketing, that wants a beautiful product and not a lousy product. What is beauty? Beauty is sometimes a combination of elegance, simplicity. It's the right thing, and it doesn't do a bunch of stuff you don't need very much. Steve Jobs was great at that sort of thinking. Build a product for yourself, and it'll be better than you can build if you build it for someone else. Third, keep the engineer. When you're trying to decide, we want to start a company, have a really qualified engineer, and they don't have to have gone to a university. Find somebody who has built things, a young kid who has built things all their life and turned them into reality. Bring that person along, because they will solve the problems to build whatever you need. But they're so clever. Engineers are so clever in their mind at solving problems, going through long things. How do I get this fixed? What is the problem? They're so good at thinking. They will come up with better plans for what your company's going to be when you write your business plan. Second, I tell them, if you're going to start a small company, work as long as you can on your own money and develop a working model, either on a visual screen on a computer or a virtual screen or a hardware product, something you can demonstrate, because you're going to own more of your company, and it's going to be worth more from the start if you do it that way than you just start in with a raw idea that you can write down well on paper.
Mr. Steve Wozniak, thank you very much for for all the inspiration things that you said. We have a gift for you that represents
this
program.
is too much. Oh my gosh, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
So
That
beautiful.
represents the ship where we have all the power owners.
Oh my gosh.
And that might remind you of Kuwait.
Oh my gosh, this will be in a prime place in our house.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
And thank you again for having us.
Well, thank you for thinking of me. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Thank
and
you.
I do hope to get back and see real Kuwaitis, soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
بعدما غير العالم ما زال مصرا على الاستمرار. بعدما غير العالم بكل تواضع اعترف بأن أجمل ما في أبل ليس منتجاتها بل تطبيقات من إبداعات الناس رفعوها في أب ستور. بعدما غير العالم أهدانا هذا الحوار وحثنا على تغيير العالم وصنع الفارق، فباب الإبداع ما زال مفتوح. شكرا على المتابعة.